Okay, so we are officially back with the top games of the week for week 10 of the college football season. Again, this is the CFB Whisper Show Halloween edition. Thank you guys again for tuning in. So if I were to just go ahead and just cut the bullshit, just go right on into it. Ohio State, Penn State, huge game. Penn State's undefeated. It is a noon game. Of course, Penn State's more than likely going to have the whiteout. Neither team are necessarily not accustomed to playing noon games. For some reason, in my opinion, I do believe that the majority of these big games, especially when it comes to the Big or the Big Ten, however you want to reference it nowadays, they are usually playing games at noon, so neither team should be sleepy. Also, when it comes to the weather, neither team should be technically affected in terms of it being a little bit of a chillier one team being in Pennsylvania, the other team being in Ohio. Penn State's obviously coming in ranked as the number 3 team. Ohio State obviously coming in ranked as the number 4 team. Ohio State dropping the ball against Oregon earlier in the year. Other than that, they should be undefeated, but they'd still drop the ball. That's unfortunate. A lot of that comes down to the offensive line and how depleted they are there, and their inability to run the football. So, if Ohio State is obviously able to establish the line of scrimmage and run the football and not put all the pressure on their quarterback, I do think Ohio State will have a fighting chance, because I do think Ohio State's defense is actually really elite. However, Penn State's defense is also pretty damn good. That stable of running backs that Penn State has in the backfield, granted, they haven't played the most elite caliber of competition. They still have had their way, and it's kind of been one of those things where it's like a prove me wrong type of thing. I'm going to continue to run the ball down your throat until you prove that you can stop the ball, and Penn State's been able to survive thus far throughout the season because of that. Now, if you look at the history, Penn State's also known to actually do really well in the conference altogether. But then when they play teams like Ohio State or Michigan, they end up actually dropping the ball. So will that be the case this weekend? We don't know. A lot of people anticipate Penn State actually making this a bit more of a competitive game in comparison to years past, because they do have such a balanced offensive attack, and that defense is still playing at that elite level. But Ohio State has always had their way against Penn State from an offensive perspective. Now, that does change a little bit this year, like I mentioned, because Ohio State's inability to run the ball and their depletion along the offensive line is a bit of a concern for me. But I still believe that Ohio State is arguably one of the best teams in all of college football. Their roster is absolutely ridiculous, especially if you look at the FPI rankings from an overall team roster perspective. They are amongst the true blue bloods. They're just a really good team, and if they show up, this might be a really difficult game for Penn State to actually overcome. I think Ohio State does have the ability to control the line of scrimmage from a defensive perspective and minimize the rushing attack that Penn State's been able to enforce on the teams that they've played thus far. But again, it's one of those things where it's literally like bend or break, right? I think Ohio State is going to come into this game ready to go because they've already lost a game. I think Penn State can afford to lose another game. But Penn State obviously has several games coming up on their schedule, at least the back end of this season, that they can't afford to lose this game because they might actually drop another one. But I do believe Penn State is going to keep this one close, but I wouldn't be shocked if Ohio State ran away with it. And so if I were to just leave this at a very high-level overview in terms of what I believe this game is going to turn out, I think Ohio State's going to run away with this game. I don't think this game is going to be close. I think it'll be close in the first half. I think Ohio State will find a way to finally start to build some sort of momentum, not just defensively, because they've essentially been there for the most part all year defensively. I think Ohio State's going to find a way to establish the run because they probably heard too much about how their offensive line is depleted and how they can't run the ball. And if Ohio State wants to contend for anything, not just in this game, but just moving forward, whether that be the Big or the Big Ten championship, if they even end up making it to that point, or especially the playoffs, which in my opinion, I feel like they're a lock for that spot, even if it's a higher seed, they have to be able to establish the run to some sort of degree. They can't take all that pressure and put it on their quarterback and expect to win anything of significance. So I do think Ohio State is going to find some sort of momentum on the ground. I do think Ohio State is going to be able to minimize Penn State's rushing attack. They're going to force the game on the quarterback's shoulders of Penn State, make him beat you. And I think Ohio State is going to be able to capitalize on the running game that they've been able to generate in comparison to what they've not been able to thus far this season. That's going to open up the pass game. That's going to create some easy explosive plays for Ohio State. I think Ohio State's going to run away with this game, arguably by at least a 10 to 17 point victory. So I'm not going to give a final score on that, but just I wouldn't be shocked if Ohio State won this game by 10. I wouldn't be shocked if they won it by 17. I just don't think Penn State, even if it being at home, is going to contend in this. I think this is the type of game that Penn State typically drops, and I think they do so again. Now, if we were to move forward on into the Ole Miss and Arkansas game, Sam Pittman at Arkansas is obviously doing incredible things. Ole Miss seems to be up and down with Lane Kiffin. I'm not really the biggest fan of Lane Kiffin, to be very frank. I do think that Lane Kiffin has been one of those types of coaches to understand what the transfer portal is, understand the NIL, and he's definitely had success to a higher level in comparison to what Ole Miss and just that program altogether is accustomed to. I do think that Ole Miss, technically from an offensive perspective, should be able to run away with this game, and I do think Ole Miss's defense is elite enough to actually control and minimize the explosiveness from Arkansas, knowing that Arkansas's offense can be explosive, but it's hit or miss again with them. I do think Sam Pittman and this Arkansas team have found some sort of groove, and they're on their way. Now, granted, they haven't had the best last 2 weeks, but I do think that because Sam Pittman has found something, I do believe these players want to fight for him. They'll play for him. I still believe that it won't be enough. I think Ole Miss is going to run away. I just think Ole Miss has too much offensive explosiveness in comparison to Arkansas. I think if this gets into a shootout, Arkansas doesn't technically have a chance. And, I mean, a lot of you might disagree with that because of what Arkansas has been able to generate, especially with them knocking off Tennessee earlier in the year. But Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin, he's going to dial up something. He has the playmakers on the outside. He has the running back that can obviously generate that run play to open up those explosive plays. I think this is Ole Miss's time. I think they shine. I think Ole Miss ends up winning this game. It might be close at first because Arkansas is literally no slouch, but I think Ole Miss will run away with that one. Now, the Oregon-Michigan game, this one's a little bit of a trickier game for me because I think that Michigan, even though they came off a national championship run, even though they lost the majority of their roster except their running back, of course, they lost, Harbaugh. I do think that they have the right coach in place for them to continuously be a good football program. I do think that he's going to be able to recruit at a certain level that over the next couple of years, they'll be able to maintain a certain level of success, and Michigan will return to what we're accustomed to seeing in the last couple of years, at least under Harbaugh. But I don't think that Michigan, from an offensive perspective, is going to be able to generate enough points to keep up with Oregon. But if Michigan does find a way to control the line of scrimmage and play their brand of football like we're accustomed to seeing, and that is just run the ball, control time of possession, and then force Oregon, obviously, to score extremely fast, and then with limited time, because I do think Michigan's game plan going into this should be control time of possession so that you can keep the ball out of Dylan Gabriel's hand as much as possible. It could be a bit closer. I still think that Oregon is one of the more complete teams, especially from an explosive perspective. I think Oregon runs away with this. I think Michigan's obviously just not the team that we're, used to seeing in the last couple of years, especially last year. And there's a large reason for that, like I mentioned a moment ago. I think that that'll change over the next couple of years under their new, head coach and obviously that new staff. But right now, Oregon under Dan Lanning is they're just churning. They're rolling on all cylinders. They're clicking. They obviously have the momentum from beating Ohio State earlier in the year. They're definitely explosive. Dylan Gabriel's that guy. That defense tends to show up. They're very, very explosive on special teams as well. I think Oregon, even with it being in a big house, they run away with this. It could be close, but give me about a 10-point spread there in favor of Oregon. Now, if we were to obviously fast forward into the Louisville-Clemson game, Louisville's been a bit up and down, in my opinion. I think Louisville's still a good team. I think Louisville's fundamentally sound. I think that they play according to their scheme and they understand the type of game that they need to play. But from an athletic perspective, from an FPI overall roster perspective, Clemson's obviously got the better end of that. Clemson's caught a lot of fire right now. This could be a tough game for Clemson because it's arguably, in my opinion, been one of the more challenging games in comparison to what we've seen thus far Clemson play since losing to Georgia earlier in the year, but it just seems like something clicked once they lost to Georgia. They've been playing more sound on defense. They've been more explosive on offense. I think Clemson's one of those teams that you don't want to play at this time going into this, time of year. I think Clemson's obviously going to run away with this. I don't think it'll be a landslide. I think it'll be a close game for the majority of the time, but I wouldn't be shocked if this also turned into a 7 to a 14-point spread because Clemson might get a garbage touchdown at the end, or potentially if they already have a 10 to a 14-point lead at that point, Louisville could get some garbage points heading into that. But a night game in Death Valley is just hard altogether, and Dabo Swinney is going to have his team ready for that, and we'll see what happens. Now, Pitt, SMU, both teams obviously incredible. This is, in my opinion, one of the more underrated games going into Week 10. I think Pitt's obviously playing some incredible football. Now, they just came off an emotional win where they just absolutely destroyed, the team that they played. I don't know if they're going to have some sort of withdrawal on that, if there's going to be some sort of emotional letdown, because that's typically just what college football is. We have some young players that are it's just hard to keep, momentum and just enthusiasm and everything up. Now, granted, they have a lot to play for. SMU is obviously out there playing, and they're beating all the teams that they're playing. So this is high level. This isn't me technically breaking it down. I made sure to mention that at the beginning. But if I were to just say, I think this game's going to be a lot closer than what people are thinking. I do think that SMU has the horses, no pun intended, to obviously keep up with Pitt for a large part of the game. But I just think that Pitt, from an offense and defensive line perspective, and just how explosive they've been on offense from a ground attack, and then obviously their defense being able to generate those turnovers, this might be one of those games where Pitt just kind of runs away with it, and it might not look as close as what the experts are thinking, and Pitt ends up running away with that as well. So there you have it. Thank you guys, obviously, for joining me. Again, my name is Cam. You guys, this is the CFB Whisper Show, Halloween edition. So excited to have you guys join me. Hopefully you guys had just as much fun as I did. Remember, I can't do this without your all support. Now, I want to make sure I emphasize one last time, our goal was to hit 2,500 subscribers. We officially hit that. We're currently sitting at 33 plus 100 subscribers. Our next goal is to obviously hit 4,000 subscribers. We can't do that without you all. I just really appreciate you guys. I really want to hear from you guys, hear what your all's thoughts are. If you liked what you watched in this video today, don't forget, go down there, like, subscribe, share. This is, again, a college football connoisseur page, show, channel. If you live, breathe, bleed, sweat, anything in relation to college football, barber talk, anything, this is for you. Let's go, baby. Let's have fun with this. Let's see what Week 10 has in store. Happy Halloween to all of you guys, and let's get it.